Back in 2015, I was at a Toys R Us in Ocean Terminal, Hong Kong, standing in front of a wall full of Star Wars Black Series figures. While such a sight was quite impressive for a toy collector like myself, at the time, I wasn't collecting any Star Wars toys, so I was about to move along until a large sign in the middle of the display caught my attention. Sale. 50% off. Like most kids born in the late 70s, Star Wars was the first major toy line I fell in love with. It was my older brother that introduced me to that wonderful world in a galaxy far, far away inhabited with Jedi Masters, Stormtroopers, droids, and numerous other alien races. And it was my dad that steadily fed and nurtured my growing collecting habits and completist tendencies by bringing home endless numbers of Star Wars action figures whenever he returned from his numerous business trips abroad. Despite the fact that Star Wars was the first toy line I really collected as a kid, as a now adult toy collector, it was the one toy line I made a conscious effort to avoid. And the reason was simple. There were just so many Star Wars toys out there, I really wouldn't know where to start. Ever since the original toy line, Star Wars was known for making an action figure of almost every single character that appeared in the movies. It didn't matter if the character appeared for only a few seconds in the background of a scene. More often than not, that said character was immortalized in plastic form. There were just too many toys to collect, so I didn't even try. Okay, so I picked up a few bounty hunters, Jedis, and Ewoks here and there. Now, aside from having a kajillion characters already existing in toy form, another detail common with all Star Wars action figures was their scale size, which was, up to that point, 3.75 inches. This all changed though in 2013, when Hasbro launched their 6-inch Black Series line, which was supposed to be aimed at adult collectors like myself. And so, to cut a long story short, I eventually caved and bought my first Black Series figure, Darth Maul, whom I found on sale at Amazon. At this point, I was still very much in denial and telling myself that Darth Maul would be it. I told myself that he would be the only one I would get, as he was my favorite character from the prequels. But I'm sure this paper-thin rationalization is something many collectors have said to themselves over and over again. Looking back, my inevitable fall to the black side can be summarized to 3 major events that led me to finally going all in on yet another major rabbit hole. So, let's talk about it. The first was in 2015 during that aforementioned fateful trip to Toys R Us in Hong Kong, where I came across a boatload of Wave 2 and 3 figures, all selling at half price. It was too much to resist, so I got myself the main 3 of Bespin Luke, Han Solo, and Slave Leia. Oh, and I threw in a prequel-era Ben Kenobi just for good measure. I find it quite amusing at how pricey and sought after a figure like Slave Leia has gotten today, and there I was rifling through multiple Leias just to find the perfect looking one. Anyway, even with that impulsive binge on a toy line I was definitely not going to collect, I was still firm in my resolve. These were just the main characters, who can definitely stand on their own. Which was exactly my logic when I clicked on the buy now link on a decently priced Boba Fett. Okay, so not a main character, but definitely iconic. Slowly but surely, just like Anakin was swayed into the dark side, I felt myself being sucked into collecting this new toy line. But there was always a perfectly rational reason for every new purchase. Now, because I got Han Solo, I had to get Chewbacca, right? And owning Boba Fett meant that I needed his fellow bounty hunter, Bosk, right? And how could I not get a Wampa? Anyway, the second event was a literal one. Later that year, September 4, 2015, Friday, Force Friday to be more specific. Weeks before, I had told myself that I wouldn't let myself get caught up in all the hype of the midnight release of the new Episode 7 toys. Although I was remotely interested in getting a 6-inch Kylo Ren, the mysterious new baddie for the new movie, I figured I would just get him eventually when all the hype died down. I didn't feel the need to go hunt for him at the stroke of midnight. Anyway, the next morning, my Facebook feed was filled with pictures of people's purchases from the midnight launch, and feelings of jealousy and regret started to stir in me. It turned out that aside from the first wave of the Force Awakens figures, the second wave was also released in limited quantities. And this second wave contained another character I was interested, the shiny silver stormtrooper named Captain Phasma, who at that point everyone was expecting to be the next Boba Fett. So after work, I decided to check out some toy stores and try my luck at finding myself a Kylo Ren and possibly a Phasma. The first couple of stores I checked were practically wiped out of any 6-inch figures. So I moved on to the next store, and then the next. Every store I checked yielded the same result. Nada. And by the third or fourth store, I was totally locked in on the hunt. I had to find my Kylo Ren. At this point, I had already given up on Phasma. And thanks to my amazing wife who drove around with me all around the city, I was able to check out 8 different toy stores. But unfortunately, came up with nothing. After striking out 8 times, I was done, defeated, and had pretty much given up on all hope. We had one more thing to do that evening, which was to watch a play my nephew was acting in. Luckily, it was being staged in a mall which also had a toy store. It was my final shot, and at this point, I wasn't really expecting anything. So as I slowly approached the store like a defeated man, simply going through the motions, I quickly noticed a shiny figure being displayed in the store window. As I got closer and realized who it was, I had to do a double take. It was Phasma! Immediately, I ran into the store and went straight to the Star Wars display, and I just couldn't believe my luck. After 8 strikeouts, I finally hit gold. They had both Wave 1 and 2 on display. So I grabbed my Phasma, I grabbed my Kylo Ren, then in my excitement, I grabbed the First Order Stormtrooper and a Guavian Enforcer, just because he looked cool. And just like that, my Force Friday was made. But it didn't end there. Still on a high from my successful Force Friday adventure, I realized that there were now a few more gaps I had to fill in my new collection. So on my next toy hunt in Green Hills a few days later, the Black Series hunt continued. First, I now needed an original trilogy Stormtrooper to complement my First Order one. And while I was at it, I figured a Clone Trooper would complete that set quite nicely. Second, having both Darth Maul and Kylo Ren meant that Darth Vader had to follow. And finally, since I found him as well, I added IG-8A to my bounty hunters, giving me 3 out of the 4 original vintage bounty hunters released in 1980. Unfortunately, I would have to wait a few more years before we finally got Dengar. The final event was in 2016 when I went to Japan for the first time. Now I know what most of you might be thinking. Japan? How can a country where Black Series figures are basically considered imports lead to my final downfall? Well, you're right. I didn't really get any Black Series stuff there. Instead, I got myself a bunch of higher-end Star Wars figures from SH Figuarts, Mayfix, and Bandai that fit in nicely with my current Black Series figures. And this was basically my final admission that I was fully committed to building a substantially complete Star Wars 6-inch action figure collection, firmly built on the Black Series toy line. Which brings us to today. As of writing this, I have put together a quite comprehensive, predominantly Black Series collection with almost every major branch of this galaxy far, far away properly represented on my shelf. The original trilogy, prequels, sequels, and everything in between. They're all there. It took a while, but like I said, it was inevitable that I would eventually come full circle back to the first toy line that I collected as a kid. And despite my best efforts to resist, I have totally turned to the black side. So are there any other Star Wars Black Series collectors out there? How did you get started? Did you initially resist like me or welcome the line with open arms? What was your first Black Series purchase? Let me know in the comments below and tell me your story. Thanks for watching Stories from the Toy Shelf Redux. If you enjoyed this story, please click on the like button and subscribe to the channel to help me tell more. Until the next one.